Hey everybody, this is Bill from Trek Live. Dan's away this week, but I figured I'd give this a shot and try a solo quick check-in episode. So this is going to be episode 164. It's going to be quick. I'm going to just do a really quick rewatch recap for myself. We weren't live last week, we pre-recorded, so I've watched a good bit over the last 2 weeks or so. And I used to share like more detailed reviews on Twitter, and I kind of stopped doing that because I talk about it here. And even with that format, though, it's really quick. I don't give grades or anything usually on these rewatch recaps on Trek Live, but today I'm going to do that. I'm going to show you the spreadsheet that I use to track my episodes, like when I watch and how I watch. And I'm not going to reveal all the ranking stuff that I do in here quite yet. But I thought I'd share with you. I'm going to give like a real quick, no more than a minute, hopefully, hit on each of the episodes that you see on the screen right now. These are the episodes that I've watched since the last time I did a rewatch recap on Twitter, or on Trek Live. And I'm going to give a real quick review. I'm going to grade it and put it in the spreadsheet. And then we're going to get out of here, hopefully, in no more than 25 minutes at the most, I hope. So I'll just get right here rolling. As you can see, I watch... If you follow me on Twitter or you've followed along with Trek Live at all, I tend to alternate series. I watch them in true air date order. And, Deep Space Nine overlapped with The Next Generation in the early days, and then with Voyager later on. So that's how I watch. I don't necessarily just usually binge right through a show independently. I'll go back and forth and watch them as they were airing. Back in the day, in 1995, you'd get 2 episodes a week. You'd get a Voyager and you'd get a Deep Space Nine fairly often for a big chunk of those 90s years. So that's how I watch, and as you can see here, I'm starting with Improbable Cause, which I love. It's another entry into the sort of film noir take that Deep Space Nine often has. It's a mystery with Odo trying to unravel an assassination attempt on Garrick. I love that. I love the way Avery Brooks, who directed it, shot many of the big set piece scenes. There's a big moment where Odo's on like an asteroid talking to a Cardassian, and he's up in the upper level, and they're not looking at each other. It's very, very film noir-y, very throwback to something that you'd see like Humphrey Bogart doing in a movie in the 1940s, and I love that stuff. I love his interrogation of the alien who has the colognes and the perfumes. There's great moments in it. It's a great episode for Rene Auberjonois. And it sets the stage for what's coming in the next episode of the Dice Cast, which is really like a universe-shattering, moving everything forward for the Star Trek universe, really. So I'm going to go ahead and give Improbable Cause an A. It's one of my favorites from the early Deep Space Nine years, like first 3 seasons, and some of Odo's best stuff. Great Garrick stuff as well. Cathexis from Voyager, I think is a bit of a misfire. It's sort of a gothic thriller, ghost story, aliens in a nebula with, disembodied Chakotay, trying to keep the ship out. Not a huge fan of it. I think it's a little bit of I think the spookiness kind of wears off pretty quickly and gets a little silly with the healing medicine bundle thing hanging in sickbay over Chakotay. A lot of that stuff usually falls pretty flat for me, and it did again this time. So, not a fan. I'm going to give it a D. But I learned on Twitter that some people really like that episode. So, like all of these things, your mileage may vary. Some of these episodes are hotter for some than others. The Dice Cast, to extend off of Improbable Cause, I think the big selling point here is the ability to do big things and small things. You got the Cardassian and Romulan huge moving the universe forward. Deep Space Nine really embracing the fact that it has full reign of the Alpha Quadrant and all the big stuff that we're usually living in the Star Trek universe. No TNG anymore. Voyager's far away, so they get to really move the ball forward in the way that they want to, and they embrace that in the Dice Cast and really start to leave a big footprint in the Star Trek universe. And then on the smaller, more granular level, you have the great scene that I think is pretty iconic at this point between Odo and Garrick, that interrogation scene where we really get to explore the similarities of these two guys, that they're both, exiles and long to go home, and they don't mean Deep Space Nine when they talk about home, if they're being really honest with themselves. I think that's a great moment, some of the best acting that you'll find in any Star Trek anywhere. And I love how different Improbable Cause and the Dice cast are. Improbable Cause, I talked about being like a film noir, mystery, slow burn, following Odo around as he works through the problem. And the Dice cast is a very different hour, much different tonally, with huge space battles with the Romulans and the Cardassians and the Dominion and the Defiant coming in to save the day. Very different episodes, but equally excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and give the Dice cast an A. So we got a strong run of Deep Space Nine episodes there. Faces, I think, is strong. I think Roxanne Dawson's, on average, really good. I think she can go a little over the top with her Klingon half. I think she's excellent as her human self. And I quite the opposite of the Kazon. I'm really intrigued by the Vidians, and I like what Voyager does with them early on. Some really shocking kind of body horror stuff with Lieutenant Durst's face being grafted onto this Vidian guy, this Vidian doctor working on Torres, and it's the same actor. The way the innovative casting, I think, really works there. Definitely dark and grim and rough stuff in that hour, but I think it's a nice exploration of B'Elanna, and we give it a B. I think it's a rock solid episode. Not perfect, but really good. Explorers, I love the exploration of Sisko as a father. I think that's such a foundational element of Deep Space Nine and the Sisko character, and I love when the show goes there and really commits to it. And the Jake isn't going to follow in his father's footsteps, and the sort of exploration of that dynamic I really enjoy. I love the Bajoran Solar Sailor and the exploration of Bajoran history and the way that the Cardassians view that. I like the subplot, the B story with Bashir and his classmate, the valedictorian coming to the station, his sort of reaction to that, and her reaction to him and the unexpected way that goes. I think that's all really strong stuff too. So I'm going to go ahead and give Explorers a B+. It's a very strong outing. I know Dan loves that episode. Jetrel is very, very heavy stuff. It's obviously like a Holocaust sort of allegory, look at genocide. It's a deep dive into Neelix's psyche and the fallout of a major conflict with the Talaxians and Dr. Jetrel's people. There's some subterfuge going on with what Jetrel's really trying to do and not being totally honest, and I think that character is certainly very complicated. James Sloyan, who's a Star Trek veteran, from The Defector and plays Dr. Mard, Odo's, quote-unquote father. I think that he's really, really strong here. I like Jetrel a lot, but I can certainly see the Delta Flyers podcast with Garrett Wang and Robert Duncan McNeil really surprised me earlier, like last year, when they reviewed this episode and found it to be overly heavy. And I think this usually is a pretty well-respected early episode of Voyager, pretty usually cited as one of the stronger, like, season 1 episodes. And I've always agreed with that. But I remember listening to their review and kind of having to look back and, think about it through a different lens, and I could see where they were coming from, that it's like maybe a little overly heavy and one note, and I still think it's very strong, and I'm going to give it a B+. I really enjoy it. I think Ethan Phillips is really great. I think James Sloyan's really great, and I think the heft is pretty well handled, but I can see how, again, your mileage may vary, like all these episodes with Jetrel. Family Business is a Ferengi sort of family comedy with Moogie, Quark and Rom's mother, earning profit and putting Quark into some hot water, having to go home and sort of work through it and see what's going on and deal with the family drama of that. And like many of the Ferengi episodes, a lot of the humor kind of leaves me cold. I think a lot of the Ferengi dynamics haven't aged particularly well. Certainly very misogynistic, which I think has become more difficult to swallow as the years have gone on. Even back then, when I was a kid watching them, they were never my favorite episodes. I think Armin Shimmerman's great. I think he brings his A game. I think all these actors are really good. I just wish there was a little bit more nuance to the Ferengi dynamic. I find it to be a little one-dimensional and a little one-note myself. I do like the Cassidy Yates intro and the extension from Explorers. That kind of starts with Explorers. Jake kind of pushing the issue of maybe it's time to meet somebody and kind of move forward for Ben Sisko. So I enjoy that part of it, but I think on balance, it's kind of a misfire because of how driven by the Ferengi stuff the episode is, and how that mostly doesn't kind of work for me. So I'm going to give it a D+. which I imagine is probably a little lower than some others would go. Learning curve, another one that kind of surprises me whenever I talk about it on Twitter when I hit it in rewatches. A lot of people really like this episode, and I can see why. It actually does explore the Maquis stuff, and Voyager gets a lot of bruising from how quickly it kind of moves on from this is a mixed crew and how cohesive they are pretty early on, and this isn't certainly a look at not everybody eases into this new dynamic so easily. We get a hodgepodge of characters here that are really rubbing up against the Starfleet protocol and fitting in, and Tuvok, who is very rigid himself and has his own issues with being able to adapt to change and unpredictable situations, having to work with these guys, these four crewmen. I think Shell is a really good character. I think he's clearly the winner of the bunch. I wish the other three were a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interesting, and that's where the episode kind of falls a little bit flat for me. I find that the batch of crewmen are a little one note for me. I wish there was a little bit more to them. Granted, you can only accomplish so much in 40 minutes, and it's really, I think, rightfully so, more an exploration of Tuvok and his own inflexibility than these four guest stars. But I think the episode would have been well served to, find a way to give a little bit more meat to chew on for that batch of crewmen. So that's the season finale of season 1, as aired at least. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a C, as a sort of right down the middle, perfectly average, inoffensive, but not necessarily memorable episode. 3 in a row of Deep Space Nine to end season 3 here with Shakar, which is the introduction of Shakar, who's kind of evolves into Kira's sort of next love interest for the next little bit. But more importantly, I really love as a kid, I was never a huge fan, unsurprisingly, as like a young teen and kid. The Bajoran politics and all of some of these episodes didn't always excite me the way some of these other Deep Space Nine storylines would. But as I've grown older, I've grown to really like that. The vacancy in the civilian government coming open, and Kai Wynn kind of trying to grab power, and the challenges that brings forward, and I think that's well explored, and I think Louise Fletcher is really strong here, kind of underrated outing for her. And I like the way that conflict resolves itself at that sort of crossroads with Bajoran militants military guys up on the hill ready to blow away, or the rebels up on the hill ready to attack the security officers who are there looking for Shakar to arrest him, and finding another way and not spiraling down into another conflict is well played and nice, and I really enjoy it. I think Shakar's another rock solid episode, not a classic necessarily, and not an all timer, but a really workmanlike, well executed episode of Star Trek. Facets is another one that, again, the reaction on Twitter and some of the positive feedback I saw really surprises me. I think it's good. I think it's fine. I should say. I think it's fine. I like the exploration of Trill, the Trill lineage, and Dax's previous hosts. The first half of the episode, or maybe the first couple acts, where you get the montage of the different actors getting to play different characters, different facets of Dax's own personality. I think that's really clever and well done. Gives the actors some interesting things to do. I think the Curzon element lays it on a little thick, and I don't always buy the way that plays out, and the sort of implied that the sort of implication that Odo is as willing to stick with this new dynamic of Curzon-Odo mix as Curzon is clearly wanting to pursue. I certainly appreciate the way that it puts Dax on her heels and makes her self-reflect and look at her own role in this lineage of hosts. But I think the episode runs out of gas a little bit as it really dives into the Curzon dynamic. I don't know that it aligns with, and this might be a me thing, a totally subjective me thing. I don't know that it aligns with the way that I see Curzon as portrayed in scenes where Dax and Sisko were talking about Curzon. I think it's. I don't find him as likable as the memories that they talk about would lead me to think he would be. I guess that's the way I would put that. So I'm going to give it a C. I think it's a strong C. It's close to a C+. It's stronger than Learning Curve, but it's in that middle mixed bag kind of territory for me. The Adversary, to finish up season 3, is an action-heavy, really tense, thriller on the Defiant. I think it makes great use of the Defiant sets, making them feel claustrophobic, and that ship feels small and compact, and nowhere to turn. The heat is turned up literally. People are sweating and overheating, and I think all that stuff is really well executed. It's tense. The tension level is well executed and feels real. The stakes feel high. The Zinkithi is kind of an oddball intro into the Star Trek, lexicon lineage, I guess, the canon, as this species that we haven't really heard much about, but many Starfleet officers have, I guess, participated in a war or some conflicts with these people. We never really hear from them again. We never really see them, so that's kind of an odd thing. But that's kind of neither here nor there. I really enjoy the Adversary. I think it's a key part of the Deep Space Nine story as a whole. Moves it forward. Odo has to make a choice at the end that clearly has some major reverberations throughout the rest of the show and his relationship with his own people. And it nicely sets up, I think, what's coming in early season 4, even with the way that the Changelings and the Founders and the Dominion as a whole sort of tackle these problems and how they try to neutralize perceived threats. So on the grounds of the action adventure element and the tension and the use of the Defiant, really giving us a really nice look at that ship and making it feel like a really lived in place and kind of scary and claustrophobic, I'm going to give it a B+. I think it's a rock solid, very, very good season finale. Getting into this next season 2 of Voyager, season 4 of Deep Space Nine. Big run of Voyager episodes here, kind of getting started before Deep Space Nine got rolling that year. The 37s is a little silly for me. I know some people, again, I was again surprised, as I always am when I post that I'm watching an episode. There's always people who chime in and say, I really like that one, even when I may not agree, or the perceived consensus might not be that way. The 37s, again, I find a little goofy, a little silly, a little too much to buy as far as the coincidence goes that they stumble into these humans who are transplanted all the way out in the Delta Quadrant. I just find it a little much. But I certainly do appreciate this was filmed as the season finale for season 1 as opposed to the season 2 premiere, and I guess on both, either way it kind of works. I like the crew being put in a position to be at a crossroads and have to choose to continue on with this journey home or to settle on a nice planet in the Delta Quadrant with other humans. Like it's a forced it's a point where they're forced to commit to this journey home, and of course none of them choose to stay in these sort of unseen cities that they talk about, where humans are living and experiencing a really advanced and well-run society. So I appreciate what the episode's trying to do and what it puts the crew in a position to choose, but I think the mechanics of Amelia Earhart and the 37s and all that stuff is kind of a little flat for me. So I'm going to give it a C, as, again, sort of a mixed bag. There's some things in it that I really like. Of course, landing the ship is a cool set piece that feels like a big deal, really gives Voyager its own kind of traits and personality. That feels like a big moment. There are certainly some nice character beats throughout with a lot of these different actors getting some cool things to do, but doesn't entirely work for me. Initiations, I think, is I'm probably higher on it than the average person. I like Robert Beltran in it a lot. I think Chakotay, I like the juxtaposition of Chakotay having to explore his own sort of traditions and his own initiation rituals, things that have made him a man, the man that he is, with Carr, I believe his name is Aaron Eisenberg, who is, I think, pretty good in this episode, as the young Kazon boy, having to go through his own initiation process and his own rituals to earn his way as a man. I like the yin and yang of their dynamic, and I think it does give the Kazon some more interesting nuance than we've had up to this point. I still think they're problematic. I think they're they don't quite earn the balance between the sort of primitiveness of them and the sort of savage and they're more advanced than they should be, I think, given what they are. But I think the constantly changing dynamics of the sects and the number of them changes every day, and maps are useless to them because they're so volatile. I like all that stuff. I think there's some neat things introduced that could have, had the Kazon been a longer running thing in Voyager, this could have spawned some interesting things to explore. And we get some things later on in Season 2 that I think capitalize on some of these ideas. Episodes like Alliances and Basics later on. So I'm going to give it a B-. I don't think it's anything incredibly spectacular. I still have issues with Kazon, like I said. But I do enjoy it on balance. I think it's well shot, too. I think there's some really neat cinematography choices on the Kazon ship, the way that those sets are shot when Chakotay and Carr are being held captive on the main Kazon ship. Really interesting visual stuff going on there. Projections is a great sort of mind F mystery box kind of story. Classic holodeck kind of how do we get out of here? What the heck is going on? Mystery. Really makes excellent use of the Doctor and putting him in a situation that only he could be in. I love has he been real this whole time, and the crew in the simulation. I think it's obvious, that the show's not going to reboot to that extent. That would be a bold move, but I like how convincingly they put forth that possibility and really put the audience on its toes. And I think for a story to be that kind of complicated and for it to be as twisty and turny as it is, for me, I'm always kind of surprised at how concise and how easily understandable and straightforward it kind of is. So I think it's a really tremendous achievement for Brown and Braga. I think it's well written. I think Frakes directs it really, really well as well. Keeps it moving, given how, again, twisty, turny, and complicated it can be. And it's a highlight for me. It's one of Voyager's best early episodes. I'm going to give it a B+. Elogium is, one of the bigger misfires in this batch of episodes for me. I think, the Kes and Neelix dynamic is not one of my favorite things in Star Trek's history. I've never totally bought that. I have issues with that dynamic. But I do like the exploration of the Ocampa and Kes's background, and that it actually takes the time to look at, this is a person that's only going to live 9 years, so their experience, their life, ebbs and flows and things they're going to do are really condensed. And so this feels like it's pushing Kes's character forward a little bit and putting her in a position to look at her life and make decisions that are big and profound. And when you live 9 years, those things are going to come pretty quick. And it's certainly brought on faster by the B plot, sci-fi plot of the day in this episode. But it does put her character in a position to have to explore her own situation and her character. And there are some nicely played scenes with Ethan Phillips and Jennifer Lean. No disrespect to their performances and the work that both of those actors put in. I just struggle with the dynamic, and it's not one of my favorite character relationships to explore with those two. So it struggles to get off the ground for me and get into really successful territory. I'm going to give it a D+, but I think it really is going to ride high or low depending on how you vibe with those two characters' interpersonal relationship. Non Sequitur is a sort of Harry Kim romp, temporal displacement, time travel-y, timey-wimey kind of story, with Harry Kim waking up back home and being, obviously totally confused about what the heck is going on. He has to unpack this mystery, and it's a really, I think, at times, overly convenient, kind of wacky, a little bit much sci-fi premise. I think Garrett Wang is strong in it. He gets a lot of fun things to do. He gets to stretch more than he certainly has up to this point. He's out from behind his ops console and getting to do things, and that's cool to see. And there's some nice exploration into his relationship with Paris and the way that those two characters connect, even in a different timeline or in a different set of circumstances, that they can still make that connection and work together and establish a friendship. I like that stuff. But it's somewhere in the middle for me. I always find myself kind of with it. I'm never bored by it, but I can't say that I love it. It's not a favorite of mine, so I'm going to give it a C plus as a maybe just above average, but thumb kind of edging right on that line of thumbs up, thumbs down territory for me. Twisted's one of my least favorite episodes in all of Star Trek. I think the concept is ridiculous and way too much to buy for myself. And I find the jealousy stuff really perking up, and some of the dialogue that Neelix has with Chakotay about jealousy and things like that, I think being really on the nose and a little too much, like season 1 TNG almost-ish, with the laying it on a little thick with the exploring humanity with very little nuance and subtlety. And I do like the last couple of minutes of it, the crew kind of connecting at that last moment and kind of trusting the process and hoping that that Tuvok's right, that this is the way to go, with the very real possibility that they're living their last moments and they all kind of have their little connections with each other. That sells the melding into a family stuff that I think all these Star Trek shows lean into, and that saves it from totally bottom of the barrel. I'm going to give it a D- because I really don't enjoy it, and it's not anywhere near successful in my mind. But there are little teeny moments in those last 5 minutes that keep it from the old F. Deep Space Nine finally gets rolling here with The Way of the Warrior. I think it's fantastic. For all the obvious reasons, it kind of reboots the show a little bit with resetting the dynamic, introduces Worf into the fold, changes the whole dynamic with the Klingons, and in pretty obvious and predictable ways. I think the Dominion are behind it and sort of orchestrating the tension, but I love the way that shakes up the whole dynamic, and it takes us back to like the way of the Klingons of old and TOS when they were the real threat and imposing adversaries and kind of resetting that dynamic. I love that stuff. I think Gowron's really strong in it, and I think it's amazing how well Worf just slides right into the dynamic and hits the ground running as a successful member of this cast. I think he brings it right off the bat and fits right in, and I love everything that this episode does for the series of Deep Space Nine. It's really upping the ante. It feels like this is when Deep Space Nine hits the ground running to the point where it's completely confident in its own self, and TNG is a year in the past. The Voyager's way out in the Delta Quadrant, and they can do anything they want in the Alpha Quadrant, and building a story that can really shake the dynamic and play with the entirety of the Star Trek universe in a way that I think they were kind of tied up and unable to do while TNG was running and was sort of the big kid on the playground. So Way of the Warrior's an A. I think it's a classic and is essential Deep Space Nine. Parturition, I think, is a mixed bag, which I feel like I keep saying mixed bag, especially some of these Voyager episodes. I think finally resolving the Tom Paris and Neelix tension, the jealousy stuff, is welcome news, and I think it's better to confront it and to do something with it as opposed to having it just sort of tear Neelix's character down a bit in earlier episodes, like Twisted, like Elogium. There's some of that stuff going on. I think I'm always grateful that, okay, they're finally doing something here and, forcing these characters to connect and deal with their feelings and, what's been going on. And I think those two actors do a nice job. There's some neat special effects work that I think, has actually aged better than I always kind of expected to, with the puppet baby alien that the new Neelix and Tom Paris are working on and saving. I'm always kind of impressed by that, and I think it's well directed and well executed. But it's certainly very surface level and very simplistic, and it doesn't cut very deep. It's nothing you haven't seen before, with two guys that start at a place of conflict and go through a struggle and come out on the other side of it, at a place of understanding and being able to work together. So it's nothing dynamic or new or fresh. I wouldn't say it does anything overly exciting, but it's certainly competent and does a does a decent job of kind of resetting those two characters' dynamics, Neelix and Tom Paris, and by extension, Kes. So I'm going to give it a C, as kind of right in the middle of the pack. And The Visitor, what hasn't already been said, it's one of the all-timers. We talked about it last week. We did pre-recorded Deep Space Nine, See It, Skip It for Dan's Rewatch recap. And everything that's been said about The Visitor is true. It's an all-timer. It again, kind of like I was saying with Explorers, I love when Deep Space Nine goes there with the Ben Sisko, Jake Sisko dynamic. It embraces the fact that we have a single father kind of leading the show, and a widower, and that there's that specific relationship between father and son, at the core of that character, at the top of the call sheet for the show. And The Visitor really, I think, takes full advantage of that story possibility being availed to them, and the obvious drama that's inherently always there when you deal with like sudden loss, somebody losing somebody unexpectedly, earlier than they should, and what the idea of not completely losing that person would do to somebody, like the fact that Sisko does keep reappearing, Ben Sisko keeps reappearing to Jake, so that Jake knows that he's gone, but he's not really gone, and how far that drives Jake in his life to try to solve that is heartbreaking, and it's one of the best of all time. Certainly one of Deep Space Nine's all-time highlights, and Avery Brooks has never been better. Tony Todd, if you want to do a list of like the best Star Trek guest performances, like one-off guest shots, I would say this is certainly going to factor high up on that list as the adult, older Jake, Tony Todd. So that's an obvious A, and it's one of the very, very high up there on the overall ranking of episodes for me, for sure. So we went ahead and did that in about 30 minutes, and that's 20 minutes and 30 minutes. 20 episodes and 30 minutes, so I'll take that as a success. Jimmy77's here and has commented a couple of times on some of these episodes. Jetrell is Voyager's equivalent to DS9's Duet. Yeah, I mean, if you want about on a subject matter level, for sure, the exploration of genocide, Holocaust history being explored, certainly. I think Duet's a better episode, but they certainly both explore similar territory in unique ways. Bad Science aside, Twisted is a guilty pleasure. I think a lot of people feel that way. I think I'm probably tougher on it than many. Way of the Warrior is a fantastic episode. It almost could have been a DS9 movie. It kind of is. Feels like one, with how big it is and how much it shakes up the dynamic, and isn't afraid to move the ball forward in a way that the Star Trek movies, especially the TNG movies, felt like they obviously could do in a way that the TV show couldn't. The Way of the Warrior kind of feels similar in that regard. So, totally agree. So to wrap this up, I think we're going to be off next week. One more week of kind of non-normal Trek Live. But the week after that, I want to say that's May 1st or May 2nd, somewhere in that range. We should be back with the normal, usual Dan and me talking Star Trek in some capacity. So we appreciate everybody hanging with us, maybe checking out the last week's pre-recorded Deep Space Nine Season 4 recap. And if you watch this, I certainly appreciate it. Let me know if you enjoyed this format as a sort of maybe supplemental check-in to talk about these episodes. I'm certainly not opposed to doing this a little bit more often as a supplemental sort of solo venture. Thanks a lot, everybody, for watching live or watching the recording later on. You can find this on YouTube. It'll be posted on our podcast feed as well. We always plug our Discord server. We have a Discord server where people can connect with like-minded Star Trek fans. It's not a huge environment, not a huge community where there's a ton of people, and you feel like, if you're not watching it every second, you kind of get out of the loop. It's small, intimate, positive, like-minded Star Trek fans. If you want to connect on that level, feel free to send me a DM on Twitter at TrekFan4387. I'll get you invited. You can kind of join the party on that. And thank you again. Hope to see you soon. And take care and live long and prosper.